walk down real close today because I got a video aid. I've never had a video aid to do a sermon before, but I have one this morning. So I'm going to say grace, peace, and love to all of you from Jesus Christ, our Father, and the Holy Spirit. This is a picture, I don't know if many of you can see it, of the original church building for this congregation. This congregation was founded in 1908. If my math is right, that's 114 years ago. Now, please understand, I don't do math for a living, so I can be wrong. Sometimes people I play golf with say, how did you get that score out of what I shot? I said, I don't know. It just happened that way. But if you can't tell, it was a kind of a standard-looking wooden frame clapboard church. Probably good looking. If my math is right, there's probably nobody here that was there when that church was built. If there is somebody here that was alive when this church was built, they got a very old painting in the closet somewhere. Some of y'all know what that means. Some of you know what was he talking about? As I was working on my sermon this week, I kept thinking, these lessons just don't necessarily fit homecoming. And so I cheated and I read ahead a couple of weeks and I found the verse that I'd like to talk about today. Towards the end of the book of 2 Timothy, which is one of the books of Paul's traditional corpus of letters, these words were written shortly before Paul was executed. He was executed in 64 AD. He was executed by a swordsman who lopped his head off. That sounds pretty gross, and it is pretty gross, but I have to tell you, in all honesty, of all the different ways that the Roman Empire had of putting people to death, that was considered the quickest, cleanest, and least painful way to go. So that somebody did him a favor. Hard to think of that, I guess. But in the last chapter of 2 Timothy, these words are there. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And I'm here to tell you, most of us can't actually live out words written in the Bible. They're written in a time that we don't live in. They're written in a place that we've never been to. They were written in a language that most of us never are going to learn to speak and read. Although I'll be honest, once upon a time, 35 years ago, I could read the Greek New Testament. I can't do it anymore. It's like anything else. You don't use it, you lose it. So, but these words, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Those words, all of us get to live out. With a little effort. It's not easy. We don't just do it by happenstance. But I want to say, when you walk out of the church today, and you can look over and see the cemetery, where the faithful have been laid to rest, who lived in this church, who brought this church into being, and who have continued this church as a living part of Christ's kingdom on earth. All of them have lived out those words. They have fought the good fight. They have finished the race. They have kept the faith. Now, I'm going to guess that probably most of those folks out there, by our standards today, did not live an extraordinary life. They were mothers and fathers. Some were children. They farmed. They ran stores. Who knows? Nowadays, they sell insurance. Well, or they grow chickens. Or something else. Not much farming goes on here like it did. You know, my dad grew up in Little Mountain. I saw a picture one time of Little Mountain in 1950. I couldn't recognize the place because there were no trees. You drive through Little Mountain now, there's trees everywhere, but back then, all that land was cleared and plowed and planted in cotton. You know, my dad used to tell tales about, you know, he could pick up a 100-pound bag of fertilizer and put one on one shoulder and one on another and walk from the edge of the field to the middle of the field so he could fertilize the cotton. I can't imagine doing that. I've never been able to lift that much weight in my life. I'd do good. When my son was in 7th grade and we gave him his first bass guitar and amplifier, all I could do to be his roadie and carry his amplifier. We sometimes forget that Christian faith isn't something that we just have or that it's, you know, somehow, I know who Jesus was, and I'm good with Jesus, and I'm cool with him, so he's cool with me. Christian faith is an activity. It's something we do. It's something we live. It's something that shapes who we are. Who helps us form the opinions that we live with, and goes into the voting booth with us in elections and says, let's pick this person and not that person. Now, it doesn't care if you buy Crest or Colgate. It may care that you do buy toothpaste and take care of your teeth. But Christian faith is an activity. It isn't just something we say, oh yeah, I agree with that, and I agree with that, and I agree with that, and I'm good to go. We do that, but it's in order so that we go out and we live a particular life. And that life is its own reward. Yes, we all know we're going to die, go to heaven someday and stuff like that. That may be. I'll be honest with you. Of all the things I know about in the Bible, what happens when we die is one I really don't have a clear answer for. I got one that suits me, may not suit you, but that's okay. But one thing I am absolutely convinced of, a life of faith is its own reward. It changes us. It shapes how we look at the world. It shapes how we look at each other. And it shapes how we enjoy the life that we get to live. And one of my favorite verses in chapter 10 of the Gospel of John said, Jesus says, I came to give you life and to give it to you abundantly. I believe that. In the Gospel of Luke, at the birth of Jesus, we read that the shepherds were in the field, and of course all of us, we've all had that Christmas card in our life, shows that heavenly choir up there in the sky. But in the Bible it says the angel comes and stands before them. There's no separation there. They're not up in the sky. They are right there, intimate, personal, with these folk, saying, to you today a Savior is born. Life is changed. And Christian life changes our lives. And so for those folks that are out there that started this church in 1908, for all those who have lived through those lives, I figured out that if you were born somewhere around 1950, you might still be here with us. But if you were born much before that, well, certainly if you were born before 1940, we got baby one right there that's there. Everybody else is out of that group. That's a group of one. But their lives of faith make our lives of faith. And we pass those lives of faith on to our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, even if we never get to see them. And we gather once a year to celebrate the faith of those who went before us. I love knowing that, what was it, 4,094 people had kids so that I got here. That's just boggles the mind. When you go back and you look, and I don't know how far, my wife went one time, we went back 1403, which is a little bit further back than you went. I hate to think how many people have logged in from 1403 that got to bed, but probably more than I could count on one hand. But the faith keeps us living. The faith gives us perspective. Faith makes us into who we become. You know, when Moses was out in the desert and saw the burning bush, and he goes there and God says, take your shoes off, this is holy ground. And they have that conversation, and God says, I'm going to send you back to the people to bring them out of slavery. And at one time Moses says, well, who am I going to tell them you are? God says, I'm the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am Yahweh. And we're not exactly sure what Yahweh sounded like, because people quit saying it long before we ever got to know that word there, but it means I am, or I will be who I will be, or I will become who I will become. All of those sort of rolled up into one at the same time. God is, in some sense, always becoming God. I know that probably stirs your mind up a little bit, like I put a straw down in there, went in there and messed everything up. But it tells us we too are always becoming. We're never a finished product. My wife and I and son went last night to the Philharmonic concert, Beethoven and Blue Jeans. I didn't know until Saturday afternoon when we were getting ready to go I was supposed to wear blue jeans. Who knew? Well, see, I became something I didn't know. God works in us His wonders to achieve. Now, I got to tell you, I love the story of David. You know, his capital, where his king was, is Damascus, which is the oldest continuously inhabited city on the earth. It's not the oldest city that ever was, but it's the oldest one that was never destroyed, abandoned, or rebuilt. It's been there since it was first founded. Now, it's not looking the same as it did then, but it's always been there. And the king of Aram, who would have been an overlord of the king of Israel at this point in time, when it's told him that he can go to Israel to see the Holy Man and be cured, sends a bunch of gifts and a letter to the king of Israel. And when Naaman shows up with these gifts and this letter, and he tears his robes and he goes, this is a pretext to declare war on me. That's what he really thinks. That they have sent Naaman here, this great general who has leprosy, to have him healed when that can't be done, as a pretext to starting a war so that he can, well, kill the king and take the whole country over. And then there's Elijah, who says, tell the king, don't worry, send him to me. And then the most amazing thing happens. You know, you would tend to think that, Naaman thought Elisha would come out and do something demonstrative and great and glorious. And Elisha sends a messenger out and says, go dip yourself 7 times in the river Jordan. Now, I don't know if y'all know the river Jordan is a lot like the Platte River. The Platte River flows into Missouri. It's a mile wide and an inch deep. There's not a lot of depth in the river Jordan. So he probably had to find a place where he can get himself well all over. It says, go in there and get yourself in the river Jordan 7 times and you'll be clean. And of course, because there is no pomp, there is no circumstance, there are no magic words, there's no abracadabra. David gets in a huff and starts away, and then the servant says, Master, think about it. If he had told you that you had to do something difficult, you would have assumed that that was what needed to be done, and you would have headed right out to do it. But he told you to do something simple. So he goes and he dips and he gets clean. Jesus is on the way, walking towards Jerusalem on the border between Galilee and Samaria. Now, Jews and Samaritans don't get along. If you read the Bible much, you may have considered that. But, you know, they kind of look down on each other. And you may not know this, there's a Samaritan community that still exists today over in Israel. And they have a temple on Mount Gerizim, and they have their own version of the Old Testament. And 10 lepers approached Jesus. You know, leprosy is pretty much one of those diseases that's disappeared in the world today, because we actually got medicines that can cure it. You know, of course, it can't reverse any damage it gets done, but, you know, do that. So we know the last leper colony in the world was on Molokai, one of the islands of Hawaii. It closed down some few years ago. In the Middle Ages, if you had leprosy, you had to walk. You would go, they wandered from place to place, begging food and money and stuff like that. But you had to carry a cross that had a bell on it. You had to have a hood up under your head, and you had to cry out unclean if anybody was approaching you, so they know to avoid you. Leprosy was a terrible disease. And they come to Jesus and they say, "Make us clean. Help us." And Jesus says, "Go and present yourself to the priests." Because the priests are the ones that have to certify that they're clean and they don't have to be separated from the community anymore. Because when you were a leper, you were an outcast. You lived out on the fringes of civilization. And as they go, it says they're made clean. One comes back, he's the Samaritan. But what we forget, and this is the odd thing, every one of those other 9 did exactly what Jesus told them to do. He says, "Go show yourself to the priest," and off they go. But the one who really changed is the Samaritan, who understands that God has given a gift that needs to be thanked. Our life is a gift that we're given by God. Part of it goes back to all those 4,094 people that lived way back before us. And some who lived much more closely, parents, grandparents, and things like that, the rest here in the cemetery. And all of them come together to provide this life that God gives to us. God doesn't ask a lot. It says in our lesson today that if we are faithless, God remains faithful. Back in the day when I did the children's sermons, I used to tell kids sometimes, there's nothing you can do that is so bad, or no place that you can go that is so far or so dark that God will not be with you. And that's what we're hearing today. God is always with us, so that we too fight the good fight, that we can finish the race, that we keep the faith, those who are yet to come.